For more on what to expect from today's meeting, let's bring in Marc Short, served as the White House Legislative Affairs Director and, of course, Chief of Staff to the Vice President during the first Trump White House, currently Board Chair of Advancing American Freedom. Marc, welcome back. It's good to have you.
Thanks, Carl.
Is today a kind of showdown of sorts? What do you expect?
I don't know if it's a showdown. I think that the president, will have great interest in the higher ratings of having all these European leaders come to him. But I do think that there's a difference between the first administration of Trump and the second. And then I think the first administration was pretty united in what its foreign policy should be toward Russia, whether or not it was canceling Nord Stream 2 or whether or not it was sanctions imposed on Russia or actually taking out 100 Russian mercenaries in Syria when they crossed the red line. It seems there's a lot more conflict in this administration between different visions of those that are isolationists and want appeasement versus those who actually wanted to provide sanctions to Russia. So I think it's a more disconcerting message coming. And I think if you're President Zelensky, you got to be pretty concerned if the president is tweeting out about concessions of territory. I mean, I think we forget in this conversation that in 1994, we were part of a treaty with Russia and Ukraine that in exchange for giving up their nuclear weapons when the Soviet Union fell apart, we would help protect their integrity, their territorial integrity, and Russia committed to never invade. And since then, they've taken Crimea and now looking to take Donbass and other parts of Ukraine, too.
Right. Zelensky, by the way, other items on the wires today saying, according to Fox News, it would be, quote, impossible to give up territory to Russia. Can you sympathize with those who worry that by the end of the day, there will be even more white space between the president and NATO, for example?
Sure. I think that would be a concern. I do think that the president probably will be ameliorated by the conversation he has at lunch and hearing from European leaders that they're concerned, that I'm sure for them the concern is that, if you don't stop in Ukraine, where else could Putin go? I think that, the first Trump administration was the only one in the 21st century, Carl, in which Russia did not take additional territory. They took Georgia during the Bush administration, Crimea during the Obama administration, and now additional parts of Ukraine during the Biden administration. And so I would imagine European leaders are very concerned that there'd be more concessions given and it would have, division within NATO, which, of course, is exactly what Putin has wanted all along.
One of the key considerations here is also the security guarantees and how that pertains to Ukraine. I'm curious. You mentioned the various factions as it pertains to national security in this administration toward Russia. Would the base support troops on the ground in Ukraine to ensure that security? Would it support additional funding to go toward ensuring that security takes place?
Lindsay, I don't know that anyone's really advocating for troops on the ground here. I know that there was conversation about Article 5 that came out of the most recent summit. But I think that for many who are wanting to support Ukraine, that's kind of been a little bit of a canard that's put out there by the isolationists who say you're trying to get dragged into World War III. I think what Ukraine has actually asked is for the resources to defend itself. And, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the commentary initially was it'll be just a matter of days before they took it over. 3.5 years later, Ukraine is still fighting for its own protection. And so when they've been provided the resources, they've actually been able to defend themselves pretty strongly. And I think that's the stronger course, is to allow them to protect themselves, not advocating sending American troops, but actually advocating protecting themselves so that we stop Russia here as opposed to actually invading a NATO country that would require us to send troops on the ground.
We had a discussion earlier this morning about sort of gaming this out further. If, in fact, you were to see a removal of economic sanctions on Russia, or at least some kind of runway to increased foreign direct investment in Russia, and how American corporates might respond, whether or not they would feel it's now safe to, in some cases, re-enter commerce in that country. What do you think they'd be thinking?
I think that for a lot of leaders, it would be kind of foolhardy to think it'd be safe to invest into Russia, because I think that the policy has continued to shift, and I don't think you can trust what Putin is going to do. I think instead, a better course of action would actually be stronger economic sanctions, such as what's actually got probably the 85 Senate co-signatories right now on a bill that would impose that I think the president has asked the Senate to hold up. If he had actually allowed that bill to come to his desk, I think that would be a productive step in further pushing Russia to actually concession here as opposed to appeasing Russia.
The other sort of complicating wrinkle, Mark, at least today, Peter Navarro with some tough comments about India and their purchases of Russian oil. And of course, that all ties into the ongoing trade talks or lack of trade talks regarding that huge trading power of India. And I mean, the commingling of the tariff discussions, the trade war, and Ukraine is difficult to separate.
You're right, Carl. I think that, again, the first administration tariffs were used pretty selectively against China, steel and aluminum for national security purposes, whereas now it's across the board tariff policy across the globe. India is complicated because the reality is that we should be better partners with India in isolating China. And by basically sanctioning India the way we have most recently, I think that you actually are pushing India toward China. But it's complicated because I think that Peter's actually right that we should be imposing, more sanctions on those nations that are trading and buying oil from Russia. I think that would send a strong signal to Putin because for financial reasons, that I think is where Russia's financial situation is a distress.
Yeah, we'll see whether secondary sanctions get any kind of mention in today's meeting. Mark, it's a difficult one to crack. Appreciate you helping viewers understand what's at stake today. Talk soon.
Thanks, Carl.
Marc Short.